Okay, good morning, class. And today, what we are basically going to talk about is we are continuing with our topic on on corporation, and we are going to talk today. This is the last part the of the chapter on corporation, and we're going to talk today on the control mechanisms. Okay, all the different types of control mechanisms that we have. You're basically going to talk about the committees that's there, the committees, various committees. These are the three committees that we have: governance committee, audit committee, and risk committee. And what role do they play, right? So when we talk of control mechanisms, the for the initial set of controls of corporation that came from internal control mechanisms. That's the internal mechanisms. External controls was much later. It's the first thing when we say the main and the first thing that control of an organization comes came from the internal concepts, internal mechanisms. And these they are more important because they can monitor the progress and activities of an organization, helps in taking corrective actions when the organization is off the track. So these are the three committees: governance committee, audit committee, and risk committee, which plays a vital role in the control mechanism. We are going to actually discuss this in details. Okay, so we start with the governance committee. Right. So governance committee, what is governance committee? Like it's the board's primary source on government issues. Governance, right? It's governance is that's where the board comes into play, right? So by staying current on governance trends, what is happening? The committee monitors the board's performance, effectiveness of board's performance, board's operations, and board's governance policies. So someone has to monitor the board also. It's the governance policy. So what is the role of the governance board? Right? The board, when we say the board develops policies that gives overall direction to the management. Board takes decisions to ensure that there are sufficient and appropriate human resources and financial resources for the organization to accomplish its work. So this is the role of the governance board, right? That's the board. So what is the role of the committee? So in committee, you know what they are doing. They are usually their main responsibility is they are ensuring that all the decisions are taken in the interest of the organizations and that the role is carried out effectively. So this is the model of a corporate governance committee of any organization. That's a typical model. So what do the governance committees do? Their main responsibilities is to ensure that determine the membership of your board, the board members. Like they measure the performance, the quality of performance of the board as a whole, as well as individual board members, how the individual members work individually as well as collectively, and also they help in determining the membership. Now, who makes a committee? Who all are there? You have a chairman, deputy chairman, secretary, and treasurer. There may be, you can also have other people like publicity officer, entertainment officer, membership officer, fundraising officer can also be there, right? So committee size should be between 12 to 15 members, right? Okay, basic information on the governance committees. Now, what happens? Some of the responsibilities that were traditionally considered to be the committee's responsibilities in reality they are actually managed by the board themselves, the independent board chair, lead chair, or presiding directors of other committees. The governance committees support the corporate governance. How? By promoting, ensuring that there is promotion of and developing of healthy healthy development and functioning of the board. So not just the board, but its committees, individual members, right? So that's what they do. So the scope. Scope of the governance committee's work. Scope is basically when we talk of the scope, we are talking of the governance, governing themselves, right? Advising the board on governance principles, working to compose a board which is diverse in nature and the board composition diverse and skilled, right? So it also includes involvement in shareholder engagement and risk management. So involved for reviewing and revising the committee's job description, that can happen, makes recommendation to the board to revise the committee's job description and other recommendations to the board for action, right? So by staying current on the governance boards, the committee also monitors the effectiveness of the board operations, performance of the board, and the governance policies, right? What are the duties of the committee? Recommend actions to the board for structural changes. Structural changes is needed, uh, which would help in compliance with the legal systems and the fiduciary duties. The committee is also accountable for the boards and the company's governance policies, governance guidelines, and governance policies, right? Other thing is with regards to succession planning. Succession planning is important, right? Succession planning of the CEO, that comes into play. Uh, Orientation, onboarding, training, evaluating board directors. That's also there. Governance committee also looks into the concept of shareholder activism. That's there. So they actually actually ensure that to shareholder activism happens when board members and this CEO does not do well. So it all, which actually means that the governance committee has a more role on looking into the board composition, board diversity, board refreshness. So they help, they take a lead role in recruiting and nominating qualified board members who would be best suited for the corporation. Okay, the recent instability in the marketplace, right, has led the boards to expand the responsibility of the governance committees to where to look into the shareholders' proposals and engagements. So shareholder activism is growing these days on and on different countries, and which is why it's become the responsibility of the organizations to look up, take ensure that shareholders' demand and needs are fulfilled, right? Also, regarding with risk management, right? Governance committees also have a role in looking after the risk management, where we are talking about the accountability for the company's reputation, non-financial risk, and enterprise management risk, business continuity plans, safety strategies, right? Also, with regards to regulations, technology, workforce, demographics, disruptions in the business model. Next, we come to audit committee, roles and functions of audit committee. But before that, we need to know what audit committee is. Audit committee is a group of non-executive directors, okay, who work under the supervision of board of directors, right? What is it's set up to it's set up as it's required, it's mandatory as per the law and regulation of the country. That's mandatory to set it up, right? uh, it's set up to ensure that best practices of governance it's done, right? So members are coming from different backgrounds, different experience, different industry, but at least one member should have an expertise in finance, because audit, that's finance comes into play, right? So that's there. Now, what happens? It's a combination. We have non-executive directors, but independent directors are also there. They work independently from all operation and operating activities, right? Uh, Now, independence here means independence from operation and independence of any kind where the interest of the company is concerned. They should not have any vested interest, right? So Transparency requirement, audit committee requirements. It says transparency of accounts inspires confidence of market, stakeholders, investors of the government and the society. To ensure this, right? It is necessary to get the actual financial accounts, which can be audited only by independent qualified auditors. Independent, right? So the question that comes is, who is an independent auditor? Who is an independent auditor, right? So members of the audit committee will be considered independent if they have no relationship with the corporation, if they have no relation with the corporation, and like there's no vested interest, no relation, which when we say no relations is which really that would interfere with the working of the independence from management and corporation. So no vested interest, in other words. Okay. What is the main purpose of the committee? Main purpose of the committee is to have a detailed analysis of the financial reporting process, audit process, company's system of internal controls, and also to ensure that the company abides by the rules and regulations of the country. Okay, right? So, responsibilities of the committee includes, as we said, overseeing the financial reporting, the disclosure process, monitoring choice of accounting policies and principles, looks after the hiring, performance, and independence of the external auditors. They also look into that. So, next thing that comes up is, what is the role of audit committee in corporate governance? They're responsible to see or monitor the company's disclosure process, ensure that the company abides by the relevant local and international laws, implements regulations and ethical standards and principles, complies with the company's bylaws and internal guidelines. Why is audit committee important? Why is it needed? To provide to which, because they act as the guardian, they monitor over the company's audit and other areas involving the financial management. It plays a key role in helping the government to fulfill all the fiduciary responsibilities where the company's finances are concerned. So, what is the audit committee report? It's a quarterly and annual snapshot of the financial reporting process. The audit process, information on the company's internal control mechanisms, and the assurance that the company is abiding by the rules and regulations. What do you mean by audit function? An accounting audit does not only examine about the company's financial statements, whether they're correct or not, but it also verifies whether the company's systems are operating as they should be, right? The systems an auditor examines, they includes the company's internal controls, measures taken to eliminate accounting errors or fraud. Okay, who appoints an audit committee? Who appoints? It's appointed by the board and is composed between 3 to 7 board members who aren't part of the corporation's management. So they are not part of the executive team. They are non-executives, right? So, okay, these basic responsibilities is their basic responsibility is to help independent auditors to actually monitor the company's financial operating system, see whether it's in a process, and that's independent of management. Executive team does not get involved into it. So there are a number of types of audits that can be conducted. One, compliance audits, construction audit, financial audit, information system audits, investigative audits, operational audit, and tax audit. So what are the advantages of the audit committee? It it can approve the quality of management accounting, right? If it doesn't, it can otherwise can also criticize. Criticism comes up, like if the management accounting system is not done properly, then criticism will come. So they have to monitor, right? So which helps to better communication between them, directors, external auditors, and management. So an effective audit committee can provide the following benefits. What are these benefits? To actually provide with an actionable rights to see and see the existing financial practices and reporting and improve upon it, to create and maintain an effective anti-fraud program, to improve upon the internal audit function, and to also monitor the company's external audit. What is the drawback, disadvantages? Independence, the problem of independence, right? The committees are required to work independently, but some key persons could be the suppliers or customers of the company, and so that affects the decision. It can happen. And second thing is where it's huge cost is incurred when you have the audit committee, right? So that's again that's another thing that comes up, right? What makes an effective audit committee? Having an effective audit committee is essential. Having an effective audit committee is essential. Why? It's essential to ensure that there is good corporate governance, because financial reporting, you have monitoring on financial reporting, internal control, risk management, external audit function. So these are being monitored, right? So that helps. These are the key areas of good corporate governance. So audit committee helps to do this. Purpose of an audit is obviously to provide an objective, independent examination of financial accounts. Independently means neutral perspective, right? So when it's been done, that helps in increasing the credibility of the financial statements that the management produces. So that also helps in developing confidence. Uh, confidence from the shareholders' point of view. It helps in reducing the investor risk and also ultimately reduces the cost of capital. And why should it be independent? Why should this committee be independent? Because to provide transparency where governance is concerned, where risk management, internal control practices of is concerned. So independent judgment means they would be able to actually look into this, analyze the situation independently, and provide advisory role with which would help in making the right decision by the management. So roles and responsibilities of the audit committee. Next, report to the board of directors. They have to report. They have to look after the quality of internal audit department. Question the chief financial officer where when the audit on the audit finding, right? When the internal audit happens, if there's any questions triggered, further answers needed, any further queries, question the chief financial officer. Advise the board for any problem related to internal audit control and risk. Look after the quality of external audit quality and the independence of the external audit committee auditors. How independent are they? The committee also works as a coordinator between the finance department and the external department if there is conflict, because external auditors, if they come and question if they have any issues, so it's the internal auditors who are actually monitoring on a daily basis, so they can act as a liaison coordinator in between, and they can actually represent the company. Okay, so what is the need of auditing, right? What is the need of auditing? Why do we need to have? Because there has to be extensive analysis of the company's operations and the maintenance of systems of internal controls. It's needed to prevent any kind of fraud, any kind of accounting irregularities. So without a proper audit system, it's not possible to do so. It's not possible to create a reliable financial reports, right? Both for internal as well as external purpose. What is the relationship between internal audit and audit committee? Relation between the audit committee and both internal and external auditors, that's important to fulfill their job commitments, because the board of directors relies on the audit committee's reports regarding the management, direction, and controlling of the organization. Main objective of the audit is to form an independent opinion on the financial statements, right? So whether it's true, whether it's fair, whether it's properly prepared and in accordance with the accounting standards. Roles and responsibilities of auditors. So what roles do they have, right? So they need to focus on the publication of important information, protection of shareholder rights. They have to ensure that there is balance of interest between all the stakeholders. The board of directors should be working independently when they give their decisions, when they give directions. There has to be proper internal control mechanisms, and the audit should the proper functioning of the audit, right? Okay. Basic concept of auditing. So, who are auditors? Auditors are people who are lawfully appointed to examine and digest the accounts referred to them, take down the evidence in writing which may be lawfully offered in relation to accounts, prepare materials on a degree or judgment may be made, report uh, the entire thing with their own opinion to the court where the accounts originated. So they are legally appointed people who would actually look into the reports that's there, analyze it to see whether it's as per the law, whether it's following on the system, and when they present it, they give their own opinions if there are any flaws or whether there's scope to improve or what is the status. Now there are 4 types of auditors that we have, right? One is internal auditor. Internal auditors are people who are hired by a company to work for that company, right? So they only take care of the internal financial documents related to their employer, help the company to come up with an accurate financial data, avoid any legal or monetary problems. And they serve as a quality control for financial processes. Second type is external, right? Now, external auditors do not, what happens is they do the same sort of work as the internal auditors, document checking and analysis, but the company only hires them for a specific project, not throughout. Okay, these auditors work for firms and specialize in selling, auditing, and giving services to companies. Government auditors. Government auditors are those who are specialized in tax and disclosure regulations. They look after both businesses and individuals to actually decide what regulations they fall under, right? And whether what they are following, whether they are following the correct regulations or not. Forensic auditors. Forensic is related to crimes, and they are used by the law enforcement organizations when financial documents are involved in a crime. Okay, so and cost audit and quality audit are also emerging stream in the current corporate governance practices. These are the other 2 that's coming up. Now, we talk of internal audit. Internal auditing, it's a tool and technique for a periodical review of the organization's systems and procedures, right? which actually say ensures whether the organization is running efficiently, performing efficiently, right? And basic principles of audit, internal audit, when you say it's integrity, objectivity, independence, they should have the integrity in where the work is concerned, objective focused, work independently, confidential. They should not reveal everything. They should be skilled and they should be experienced. Everything should be documented, planned properly. There should be evidence in what is being written in that audit, and proper conclusion, and with should be reported in the right way. Okay, next comes up is the external audit. That's the other type, right? So what happens is auditors should maintain their independence, right? So it should be independent external auditors. The external independent auditors report in any corporation should be with regards to the financial statements, right? But keeping in mind the shareholders' interest. So measures should be taken so that the information is correct and it does not have any influence of the management. We go to the next committee, which is the risk committee. Risk committee is an independent committee of the board of directors, right? And it's solely responsible for the looking after the risk management policies and practices of the corporation's global operations worldwide, and also to see whether the operations of the company's global risk management framework, right? So they help the board to actually look into the responsibilities with regards to the risk, anything risk that is there for the corporation, the risk management that is there, the risk management framework, whether they're complying with that framework, the structure, right? That is there. Okay, so the committee usually consists of 3 or more independent directors, and at least one of them should have the experience in identifying, assessing, and managing risk which are exposed, right? Risk exposures typically of large complex financial firms. They will have a director who is not an officer or employer of the corporation, right? And has not been an officer of the or employee of the corporation during the immediate preceding 3-year period. Totally independent. Should not be a member of the immediate family of a person who is or who has been within the 3 years an executive officer of the corporation. Should be an independent director under the Securities and Exchange Commission standards. So totally an independent director, right? So it's an independent, risk committee is an independent committee of the board, of the, right? So which looks after the risk management policies and practices of the company. Okay, right. So who chairs the committee? Risk management committee. So risk management committee shall include executive as well as non-executive directors. Senior management people are there who are there responsible for various risk management should attend the meeting. The chairman of the board may be a member of this committee, but must not chair it. How often should a risk committee meet? It should have a minimum of 3 times a year, right? And also the committee consider, and it can be more whenever they feel required. So at least more than half of the members should be present, right? So and when the chairperson is absent, the members should select a chair for a particular meeting, right? So risk committee, as we already said, it's they responsible for the risk management policies of the company, right? And they look after the organization's different types of risks that is there to ensure that the proper practices are put in place, and they manage the priority risk, right? Who is responsible for risk management? Risk management is the responsibility of all the employees of the organization, right? Senior management, like if you talk deans, department heads, everyone, like it could of that organization, or it could be managers, uh, all those who are responsible more directly for risk management within their areas of business. Right. What is risk management in corporate governance? Now, I've put the topic into different divided into different questions form so that it becomes easy for you, right? So corporate governance should actually ensure that risks are understood carefully, they are managed, and when it's appropriate, communicated. Attention should be given to both the financial and non-financial risk, and risk management should include or encompass both strategic risk, that's where strategic management comes in, as well as the operational risk where operations are concerned. It's important, right? Risk management, risk governance is very, very important. Why? Because it analyzes and formulates the risk management strategies to avoid and also to reduce human and economic costs caused by disasters. But what is risk? What exactly is risk? It's the past. We've been talking about risk committee. What is it? It's the possibility of loss, injury, and other adverse or unwelcome circumstances. Right. So that's what risk. It's an uncertain event which can lead to severe problems. So specific duties, responsibilities of risk committee. What is their committee? What is the basic? They will approve and periodically review the risk management policies of the organizations, global operations, oversee that the company's global risk management framework is done properly. They need to monitor that. They should, and which shall be able to commensurate with the structure. The risk management framework should be compliant with the overall structure of the organization. It should look after the risk profile, complexity, activities, and size of the corporation. Um, takes care of the policies and procedures regarding to risk, any sort of risk governance, risk procedures. Processes and systems for implementing, monitoring, and compliance with such policies and procedures, right? Where it includes the reporting, identification, and reporting of risk and risk management efficiency, establishing managerial and employee responsibility. Everyone is responsible, both management as well as employees. Common employees are responsible, and to ensure that the independence of the risk management functions, it works independently, and to integrate risk management and associated controls with management goals of the organization and the compensation structure. And we talk from point of view of global operations, right? So uh, what happens is like as it's mandatory as part of requirement, the committee also has to review and approve the company's risk appetite statement on an annual basis, right? Approve of any amendment that needs to be done, review and approve the contingency funding plan that is there, where it and any changes that has to be made, review significant risk exposures and the steps that includes policies, procedures that the company has taken, company management has taken, and accordingly make reports on this, and wherever necessary make the changes. Evaluate the risk exposure and tolerance, review and evaluate the company's practices with respect to risk assessment and risk management, review the reports and findings of the risk compliance and the internal audit department with regards to risk management, review reports from regulatory agencies relating to management, risk management and compliance. So with this, like a related thing is risk assessment and control. So risk assessment and control, we've been talking of risk committee. right? They had so risk assessment and control is where we which talks about the identification of risk, evaluation and estimation of the level of risk involved in a situation, and then comparing it with the standards and benchmarks, and then determining the acceptable level of risk. Every organization will take a risk, but what is the acceptable level beyond which there has to be control? So that's where risk committee comes into play. So these are the elements of risk control. Like you have risk control, which mitigates risk, plan for emergencies, measure and control, right? So the company has to identify, monitor, and manage risk which is associated with their business activities, and then have to see, right, develop the internal controls and risk management, which is monitored by the risk committee, right? So company company management has to establish within its management and reporting systems a number of risk management controls, which could be formal operating and strategic planning process, annual budgeting and period reporting systems, which that has to be there, guidelines and limits for approval of capital budgets and investments, policies and procedures for managing financial risk and treasury operations, coming up with conduct standards for business conduct, which is applicable for all employees, right? But certain risks cannot be eradicated to an or mitigated to an acceptable level by internal controls. So for that, you need some third parties in the international insurance markets to have a look into it and see it, right? So the corporate's audit department's mission is to provide an independent, objective assessment of risk and evaluation of the effectiveness of the internal operating and financial controls within the company's operating businesses. So that's where we are talking of the audit department. So it's all related, risk, audit department, risk committee, audit committee. So everything gets related, right? So the areas of emphasis of conduct, like when the assessment happens, that looks after what are the areas that they look for an appropriate, efficient, and effectiveness of the internal control mechanism, reliability and integrity of the financial and other operating control mechanisms, to extent of compliance with the company's policies and procedures, accuracy and integrity of security where data and information is concerned, accountability for the company's assets to safeguard against law, whether the reviews made by the operating companies are adequate for ensuring an effective internal control mechanism, right? Economy and efficiency with which the resources are employed. And the results of each audit and agree should be an agreed upon management action plan are reported upon on a timely basis to the management responsible for implementing these changes, right? Okay, so the activities of the corporate audit department are separate and distinct from those of the company's independent registered public accounting firm. So it's public accounting firm, company's registered public accounting firm has a different role, and the audit department has a different role, right? Even the risk assessment, the audit has to look into it, right? Because risk also involves financial risk comes out. Okay. Okay, we come to internal audit a little more in details. We just had discussed what internal audit, and we will be going into a little more details on this. So internal audit is an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity which is designed to add value and improve an organization's operations, right? It helps an organization to accomplish its objectives, right? Why? How? By evaluating and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance process. Internal audit does that. I just told you a while ago. Look after the risk also. right? It helps in improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the organization while analyzing, assessing the data and the business processes. So, the scope, when we talk of the scope of internal auditing, it's quite broad, and it involves talks about topics, areas like efficiency of operations, reliability of financial reporting system, uh, where you have for investigating fraud, safeguarding assets, and whether the company is complying with the laws and regulations. And it also involves frequently measuring compliance with the company's policies and procedures, right? But the internal auditors are not responsible for execution of the company's activities. They can advise the management and board of directors regarding how to execute their responsibilities, right? Okay. Criteria of a good internal audit. So, what is the criteria? Right. So internal auditors typically issue reports at the end of each audit, which talks about findings, recommendations, and any responses or action plan from management. So, audit report, they talk of 5 C's. Condition. What is the particular problem identified? Next comes up is criteria. What is the standard that has not been met? Standard is the company, maybe a company policy or other benchmark. Cause, why did the problem occur? Consequence, what is the risk or the negative outcome because of the finding? What can happen? And then comes up the corrective measures. What should the management do about the finding? What they have agreed to do and when? And these recommendations are basically designed to help the company to achieve its goals with regards to anything operations, financial aspects, legal aspects. And audit findings and recommendations, they should also relate to things about transactions, whether the transactions audited are valid or authorized, completely processed, whether they are accurately valued, whether they are processed in the right period, whether they are properly disclosed in the financial and operating systems, and other things. So we go to the last topic for this on corporation, that is good audit process, right? Audit process, what is it? It's a step-by-step methodical view of a company's operating mechanisms, right? So this is a diagram of automated audit operations. First step, first principle of a good audit process is honesty, right? It's very much, the auditors should be very much honest in what they are reporting, honest with what they are reporting. Honesty is important, otherwise it's not possible. So if you are not honest, you cannot actually do a proper auditing. That's very much required because the document audit report has to be published to the public. So auditors must make sure that all the information is properly evaluated and none of the data is altered. Right? So data collection is an area where the auditors, that's why they have to be very, very careful. Right? This is where the honesty factor comes into play. They should be open-minded when they collect all the available data to determine a problem. So if you are open-minded, if you're honest, then it becomes easy. Second principle is accuracy. Like all the records and information must be accurate, right? But if they do not have all the required information, then it's an incomplete and unreliable data. If all the applicable facts are not presented in the audit report, then what happens? That there is a misconception about the true status of a company and its operations. It comes up, right? So if a company wants to and should give an accurate picture of their operations, then it's needed that the audit report has all the information, because it will help the company to become more efficient and profitable. from long-term perspective. Reliability is another thing. Reliability, when we say it's the sources of reliability, where sources of information or documentation is concerned. Trust, okay? The source of data should be something which should be trustworthy, right? So auditors should collect data and cross-check whether the data is authentic, whether it's trustworthy, whether it's reliable or not. What comes up is completeness. Completeness is where we talk of document is documentation of the facts should be complete, right? The data, the audit report should have a complete. It should be a complete report. It should have all the information. Provide information relative to both sides of any issue, would help in analyzing the data and drawing a conclusion. So when data is collected for anything, if there are multiple opinions, all those facts has to be put in, which helps in the auditor to actually analyze and come up with the right conclusion. Right. In this regard, another thing that has to be kept in mind is whether the information uh, that as an that an auditor is collecting, whether it's should is considered to be necessary in making a decision. Like there can be so many information, but whether which is necessary, which is irrelevant, that the auditor has to decide. Fifth principle talks about qualifications of individuals conducting an audit. Okay, so qualified. The auditor should be a person who should be experienced, right? Experience is important. They should have the right qualification to conduct an audit, right? And they should also be a person who should have the right background about the auditing principles. They should be clearly aware of it. Sixth one comes up is examples of areas which require training or experience before being qualified for an audit are financial and special processes, right? So for all those who perform audits must be qualified in these areas like financial aspects, and so they should have proper trainings on how to conduct audit. So you should have these or other areas related to audit. It should be there. Only when you have proper knowledge can you have a better understanding of the requirements that should be there in that audit when you conduct the audit, and compare them with what is being accomplished. So training is important, right? Training is very much important for an auditor. They have to they should be undergoing trainings to become a proper qualified audit. That's mandatory for any audit. Okay, the seventh principle talks of corrective action, right? Which actually talks of involves the process of taking action to address issues that can arise as a result of an audit. Making right decision means what? You need to identify the true causes and then take steps how to eliminate, or sometimes if you're not able to eliminate, the reduce the impact of that problem, right? So corrective action is the responsibility of the department or the company being audited. It's not the auditor. The auditor, uh, the company's auditor actually makes a suggestion, but it's the responsibility of the department or the company that's been audited to make that implement that corrective action. Okay, so what happens? The only exception to make recommendation is when you are performing a review as a consultant. Consultant performs reviews and give recommendations to improve a system to make it better. So they get paid for it. But an auditor, they have to remain impartial. Sorry, they can make suggestions or correctiveness, right? Which the organization may or may not accept. So it's up to them. Next, the eighth principle is about validity and authoritative interpretation of vague requirements, right? Uh, Without this finding against vague requirements can be refuted by the organization being audited. So a finding where is when is really and is invalid if if it is like if what happens is if it is not valid, right? If the information that you're providing, if the interpretation that is there, the requirements, the observations, if they are not valid, and if it's also not been interpreted in the right way, right? You have to an audit has to uh, be able to recognize it, all the vague interpretation of vague requirements that should be available prior to an audit. It's, it's important. So without like a finding is a valid deficiency. It's a valid deficiency against requirements observations do not represent a violation. So anything, when you are prepared, when as an auditor, when you are doing an audit, right, your findings should be valid, what you're talking of, and there has to be an authoritative interpretation of all the requirements that you need. There has to be a proper correct interpretation which has meaning to the requirements. Otherwise it doesn't help. It's so the audit is not correct. So okay, so availability of all these recognized interpretations helps to remove all disagreements, because people have different opinions and which are not correct. So if you have authenticity, if you have the right valid interpretation, if you have the valid documents, then it becomes easy to sort out problems, that which is right, which is not right, right? Okay, ninth one is where we talk of the contents of the audit findings should be kept confidential, right? And only authorized persons can have access to it. Everyone should not be having it, right? So this which is coming in the final report, like it should be very very confidential. Confidential is because otherwise what happens? Data can be tampered, things can go wrong, right? So it should be kept confidential. Results of the audits and their details must be documented in the final report. So any references can be made to the additional documents, but the basic content, what has been reviewed, the results, that has to be included. Without it, the audit is not final. It's not fulfilled. It's not completed. Next comes up is to stay on schedule and only change if conditions want some actions. Okay, so schedule in the sense of schedule of doing the audit, that has to be, the audit is scheduled every quarterly, the audit has to go on, unless of course there is some emergency coming out, which requires that you have to go for a change of the timing. And the last audit principle that is there, it's that the auditor should not be combative to any auditee. They should not fight with the auditee, right? They should not go into any sort of arguments with the auditee. So they should have a cordial relationship, like listen to what is being said and note it down, but not get into arguments. That doesn't help, right? That doesn't help it. So that's all that we have in this chapter. And so if you have any questions, you can actually let me know in the next class, right? So that's all for today.